Gold FM.
Iran warned that the gates of hell will open more and more on the US and Israel as it vows to unleash more attacks. Ali Mohammed Naini, a spokesperson for the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, told Iranian state TV on the fourth day of the rolling Middle East war, quote, "The enemy must await continuous punitive attacks. The gates of hell will open more and more, moment by moment, upon the United States and Israel," unquote. However, these threats do not seem to echo in the field, as the Israeli military confirms a wave of extensive airstrikes targeting military infrastructure in the Iranian capital Tehran and the Lebanese capital Beirut. Defense Minister Israel Katz states that the operation aims to degrade missile launch capabilities and will continue with full force. Over in Lebanon, Israeli ground troops received authorization earlier in the day to advance and seize strategic areas to establish a buffer zone along the northern border. This move follows the evacuation of over 50 Lebanese villagers, and certain media reports that the Lebanese army is withdrawing from southern positions. Global energy markets remain under severe pressure as natural gas prices surge by over 30% today. The increase follows the suspension of production by Qatar Energy after military attacks on its facilities. And is warned that the United Kingdom is particularly vulnerable due to low domestic gas inventories and a heavy reliance on imports. Over in Oman, a drone attack targeted a fuel tank at the port of Duqm. The authorities report the resulting fire is under control with no casualties. Diplomatic tensions too have surfaced between Washington and London. President Donald Trump criticized Prime Minister Keir Starmer, suggesting that bilateral relationship is not what it once was, after the UK initially restricted the use of British bases for strikes on Iran. However, British ministers insist the operational collaboration remains strong, noting that RAF pilots are actively involved in defensive efforts to shoot down missiles and protect British citizens. Hezbollah claims to have launched retaliatory missiles and drone attacks on 3 Israeli military sites, including in the Nafah base in the Golan Heights. Meanwhile, the US Embassy in Kuwait has closed indefinitely following a series of regional threats and a friendly fire incident involving US fighter jets yesterday. The British Foreign Secretary announces government charter flights will depart Oman within days to rescue vulnerable nationals. This comes against a backdrop where Yet Cooper confirms 130,000 British citizens registered for emergency assistance as regional tensions escalated. Over in the United Arab Emirates, operations at the Fujairah oil terminal remain suspended following a major fire. Satellite imagery reveals significant damage to storage tanks near the Gulf of Oman too. Global markets face severe disruption as natural gas prices hit their highest since late 2022. Over in the Mediterranean, the Ministry of Defense considers deploying HMS Duncan to protect British bases in Cyprus after drone attacks. On the ground in Iran, the Israeli military claims successful strikes against the Presidential Office and Supreme National Security Council in Tehran. New footage confirms multiple explosions east of the capital. The Iranian Red Crescent reports the death toll in the country reached 787 since Saturday. Over in Gaza, the Kerem Shalom crossing reopened briefly for humanitarian aid, though the Rafah border remains closed. Now, meanwhile, Israel issued fresh evacuation orders for over nearly 80 towns in Lebanon as military operations continue. Residents in Bahrain and Dubai report harrowing escapes, with some civilian flights requiring fighter jet escorts to reach safety. The debate over Iran's nuclear program has long been defined by a clash between international law and regional distrust. While legal frameworks like the NPT grant sovereign nations the right to civilian nuclear energy, the West has increasingly viewed Iran through the lens of a regime nature rather than technical compliance. In June 2025, this tension reached a breaking point. Despite reports of a diplomatic breakthrough mediated by Oman, the United States and Israel launched a series of strikes against Iranian facilities, bypassing congressional approval and setting a dangerous precedent for the future of global non-proliferation. Our staff reporter Chamud Fernando spoke to Nikolai Sokov, senior research associate at the Center for Non-Proliferation Studies, who establishes that legally Iran has the right to a civilian program.
Legally, Iran has the right to have a civilian nuclear program. Legally, nothing prevents it from having nuclear energies and other benefits that are provided by our civilian nuclear program. So, number one. Number two, we don't have any evidence, in fact, that Iran has been pursuing nuclear weapons. There is some evidence that it had a very small research program more than 20 years ago, maybe like 25 kind of years ago, but it was a research program. So Iran did not have nuclear materials to create nuclear weapons. It was just, lab kind of thing. But it was clearly ended many years ago, more than 20 years ago. So no evidence that Iran was trying to pursue nuclear weapons. All the concern about the Iranian nuclear program really stems not from what Iran is doing, but from the nature of the regime. Yes, and obviously, and the Western countries simply do not trust.
Sokov critiques the collapse of the 2015 nuclear deal, noting that while Iran was the most controlled country in the world, the US abandoned and European failure to lift sanctions left Iran with no incentive to comply.
It was a good agreement. Iran was probably the most controlled, actually, country in terms of its nuclear program. Unfortunately, opposition in the United States would always remain strong to that agreement. And Donald Trump, during his first term, in 2019, he abrogated that agreement. So the United States withdrew. The agreement remained in force, but now without the United States. And of course, it was the key player. So Europeans continue to insist that Iran should continue to abide by that agreement, accept all the verification, all inspections by the International Atomic Energy Agency, but at the same time, European countries did not implement their side of the deal. They were supposed to remove sanctions on Iran, and they did. So there was really no reason for Iran to continue implementing the treaty. When you begin to say, okay, these are bad regimes, so yes, they're not allowed. Yes, these are good regimes, yes, and they can do whatever they want. That's really the road to nowhere. So I'm not so much concerned about the Iranian nuclear program, but I'm very concerned that we're living, like in the world of the Lord of the Rings. We are elves, yes, and they're orcs, yes, and we can only fight. Yes, that's a bad attitude.
Daryl G. Kimball, Executive Director of the Arms Controlled Association, also spoke to Gold FM and reveals the high stakes of the 2025 escalation.
The other thing that is clear is that in the negotiations between the U.S. and Iran, which had really only just begun again, the Omani foreign minister reported that the two sides were making serious and good progress. He said that a deal was within reach with further negotiations. Whether that's true or not, we will never know now. But based on the reporting, public reporting, the Iranians had made some serious proposals, including a long-term suspension of uranium enrichment, stockpiling of uranium, a full return in cooperation with the International Atomic Energy Agency. Those would have been important breakthroughs. But Donald Trump decided to launch the attack. His aims are not clear, and it is unclear, when this widening conflict will end. The last thing I would just note is that, when it comes to concern about Iran's nuclear program and the nuclear material, the longer it takes for the IAEA inspectors to get back into Iran, the more uncertainty there will be regarding that nuclear material. And that's one thing that some of us are very concerned about.
Kimball warns that this aggression may backfire, teaching other nations that the only way to prevent an attack from a nuclear-armed power is to acquire their own nuclear deterrent.
So there was no imminent threat. There was a serious concern that Iran had the capability to produce material that could be used for making nuclear weapons. And that requires a lot of focus and attention on the part of the international community. I do not believe that launching a war is going to be the best way to address this problem long term. In fact, it may unfortunately convince some leaders that the only way to prevent an attack from an outside enemy armed with nuclear weapons is to acquire nuclear weapons yourself, which I think is the wrong conclusion, but some leaders in the future may come to that conclusion.
This is the local news on Gold FM.
The Civil Aviation Authority suspended all flights to the Middle East pending completion of security assessments. The decision follows the cancellation of 171 flights since the conflict began on the 28th of February including 125 yesterday alone. Director General Captain Daminda Rambukwella confirmed that other international routes operate as normal. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs urged Sri Lankans in the region to monitor local updates closely. A dedicated emergency response unit now operates through the Foreign Ministry and Tourism Ministry, reachable via the hotlines +94 117 4456 41 and +94 112 207 250. In the United Arab Emirates, Ambassador Dr. Arusha Kure stated that the mission continues to prioritize the safety of over 1 million Sri Lankans living in the region. Diplomatic officers in Kuwait and Israel also confirmed that all citizens remain safe, with staff monitoring the situation around the clock. Meanwhile, large crowds gathered at Qatar Airways' offices in Sri Lanka seeking alternative travel arrangements too. Long queues at fuel stations in Colombo and surrounding areas started to subside today, though crowds persist in several outstation regions. The Ceylon Petroleum Corporation confirms that over 5 million litres of fuel was released in the last 24 hours to meet a surge in demand triggered by the Middle Eastern conflict. CPC Chairman DJ Roger Cardner assures the public that no fuel price increase will occur this month, despite rising global crude oil costs. In Parliament, President Anura Kumara Dissanayake informed members that the country maintains sufficient diesel for 33 days and petrol for 27 days. He noted that several shipments are scheduled to arrive from India and Singapore throughout March. Meanwhile, Trade Minister Vasantha Samarasinghe addressed ongoing shortages of cooking gas, stating that additional cylinders are being released to the market. A ship carrying 100,000 new gas cylinders is expected by mid-March to resolve the distribution gap. Police stations across Sri Lanka are implementing a specialized security program to protect embassies, high commissions and official residencies. The Inspector General of Police issued these instructions to all stations island-wide to prevent incidents that could jeopardize national security during the current global crisis. This framework will remain in place until further notice. The plan includes a 24-hour security operation to ensure the safety of foreign nationals travelling or living in the country. Monitoring extends to tourist destinations, transit points and religious centres, as well as private property and business establishments. Senior officials at the Triforces will provide support for these measures, if necessary, to maintain public peace. This domestic tightening of security follows reports of the escalating tensions in the Middle East, including the death of Iran's supreme leader and strikes across the Gulf region. In response to travel disruptions, the Sri Lankan government also announced a free 2-week visa extension for tourists currently in the country. Authorities continue to monitor the situation to protect both visitors and the nearly 1 million Sri Lankan workers residing overseas.
Now for some news in brief.
The Colombo High Court will deliver the judgment in 4 bribery-related cases against former Deputy Minister Sarana Gunawardena on the 30th of April.
The business news on Gold FM.
The Colombo Stock Exchange suffered its largest single-day point drop in history today, with the all-share price index closing at 22,443.38 after plunging 1,290.68 points. The S&P SL20 index ended at 6,313.65 points, following a 322.32 point decline. Turnover totaled 9.5 billion rupees. Meanwhile, trading was temporarily halted this morning after the S&P SL20 index declined by more than 5% from the previous close. Regular trading resumed 30 minutes after the halt.
International news on Gold FM.
Pakistani and Afghan troops engaged in intense combat at multiple border points today as the United Nations warned of 42 civilian fatalities since the conflict began 6 days ago. Information Minister confirmed successful airstrikes in the Bagram Air Base, citing intelligence that terrorists and Afghan Taliban troops utilized the site for operations against Pakistan.
Entertainment news on Gold FM.
Paramount Skydance plans to combine Paramount Plus and HBO Max into a single streaming platform following its successful $110 billion bid for Warner Brothers Discovery.
Sports news on Gold FM.
CRN FC qualified for the final of the Clifford Cup rugby tournament following a hard-fought victory over the Air Force team. The winning side secured their place in the championship decider by defeating their opponents with a final score of 29-22. And that's all the news for now. Stay tuned to Gold FM for the latest updates. This is our